Hey, welcome here to Mountain Lake. If you're new, I wanted to tell you are a special guest, or maybe this is a New Year's resolution, kind of check off your list. And we're happy that you're here too. And so what you need to know is what this church is all about is we're creating this church as a place where life change stories are written every single week. Kids, students, adults, and we know that nobody does that better than Jesus. And so whether you're here and you want to get plugged in instantly, or maybe you've been hurt by church or burned by Christians, you just kind of need to sit there anonymous and just see what it's all about. Either one is fine. We're just glad that you're here. Our newcomers lunch, as Blake said, is probably the best place to figure out what we're all about. Or if you want to know sooner than that, right out those doors after the service. Our newcomer suite, there will be some happy volunteers that would love to hear your story, answer any questions that you may have. Now, this is part one of a series called Rewrite. Let me just tell you something that my wife and I do for fun. What we do is we take pictures of our kids or our family moments and we post them to a little platform called Instagram. Now, just by a show of hands, how many of you are aware of Instagram or you use it personally just by a show of hands? Okay, very good. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of like Facebook, but without all the complaining. Some of you are going to sign up this afternoon just for that reason. What I noticed January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, as I was going through my Instagram feed, I noticed these things would pop up and it was called the Top 9 in 2015. This website was created where people would go and they would have their top 9 most liked pictures of 2015. And January 1st and January 2nd roll around, I was scrolling through it, and man, next thing I know, Brianna, she put her top 9 there. And I asked her, hey, what is this? She goes, you just put your name in this place and they create the top 9 most liked pictures of 2015. The ones that were most liked, they put them together as a collage and you post it. And so I went and did that. And so I have brought for you today the top 9 most liked pictures on my Instagram feed. So without further ado, here they are right here. Yes, thank you. I appreciate the awes, but that's Mike up at the top left. You're probably awing for him. Anyway, Micah, our 4th child, was born this year. That was a top moment, great moment. On the middle left, you'll see I said goodbye to a really great church. On the bottom left, you'll see me saying hello to this really great church. Thank you. And there was Christmas up there and Thanksgiving, Halloween. And then you see the bottom right picture, me in the tuxedo. That was a few months ago. That was our date night. No, that was 10 years ago. And actually right above that picture in the middle right, that was actually date night. That was actually our 10-year anniversary dinner. Now, as you look at that, you go, well, that doesn't look all that fancy. You're correct. Because for our 10-year anniversary dinner, your pastor took his lovely wife of 10 years to Whole Foods. We went first class, and man, Chick-fil-A is 15th anniversary. So anyway, those are our top 9 moments of 2015 that people like. Now, as I look through them, millions of people all over did that, took their top 9 moments, put them together for everybody to see. But as I begin to think about it, that's 9 moments out of 365 days. And what about the moments in between those 9? The sad moments, the frustrating moments, the angry moments, the lonely moments, those moments that nobody would ever want to put on their social media feed. What about those moments in life? Now, I don't know what 2015 was like for you. Maybe you had 9 great moments. Maybe you had 900 great moments, but all of us had those moments in between that we wouldn't want anybody to see, at least in a public forum. Those moments that were devastating, that were sad, that were frustrating. And so the question we're going to ask today, just to really kick off this series, is who is the author of your life story in 2015? Who was the author of your life story in 2015? Of those top 9 moments, and honestly, of those moments in between those 9. We're going to look at a story today, a passage, and it's really a speech given by a guy, and he's up in age. He's 110 years old. He's been a faithful leader of the children of Israel, and he gives this speech. It's really a farewell speech before he passes away, and his name is Joshua. And he succeeded Moses as leading the children of Israel. And in this passage, it's his final speech, his farewell speech, and he gives a final charge to the children of Israel. So with that in mind, if you've got your Bibles, I need you to go to 2 places. I need you to go to Joshua 24 and Deuteronomy 6. Joshua 24 and Deuteronomy 6. And if you don't know where Deuteronomy is, if you'll start at the left and start thumbing, you're going to hit Deuteronomy and then take an immediate right, and Joshua's right there next to it. Put your thumb in Deuteronomy 6 and then go to Joshua 24. Joshua 24, and it's the farewell speech, final speech of Joshua. And he speaks on behalf of the Lord. So the first part of his speech is the Lord speaking to the children of Israel, and he gives them a history, gives them their story of how they got to where they're at. And then Joshua begins to speak in his final charge. So Joshua 24, verse 1, we'll pick it up. It says, then Joshua summoned all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, including their elders, leaders, judges, and officers. So they came and presented themselves to God. Joshua said to the people, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. And then this is God speaking to the children of Israel. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River, and they worshiped other gods. But I took your ancestor Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him into the land of Canaan. I gave him many descendants through his son Isaac. To Isaac, I gave Jacob and Esau, and to Esau I gave the mountains of Seir, while Jacob and his children went down into Egypt. And then he continues to unpack the story, the history of Israel and delivering them from Egypt and from slavery and all the way through. And then he wraps it up by talking about how they were brought into the promised land, verse 11. He says, when you cross, this is still God speaking, when you cross the Jordan River and came to Jericho, the men of Jericho fought against you, as did the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivitites, the Jebusites, and all the other ites Chris can't pronounce. But I gave you victory over them, and I sent terror ahead of you to drive out the two kings of the Amorites. It was not your swords or bows that brought you victory. I, meaning God, gave you land you had not worked on, and I gave you towns you did not build. The towns where you're now living, I gave you vineyards and olive groves for food, though you did not plant them. In other words, what God is saying is he gives them a very brief history from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Esau through Egypt to all the battles, to all the wars. And he goes, I brought you here today right where you stand. Through the history and through the ups and through the downs, I, your Lord, your God, brought you here today. And many of you just need to hear that. I don't know what 2015 held. Maybe it was a horrible year. Maybe 2014 was a year that you want to forget. Maybe 2013 was a year you don't even speak about. But you're here, it's 2016. You are not here on accident. You are here on purpose. And God has brought you here today. God finishes speaking, and then Joshua begins to speak. Verse 14, this is Joshua. He says, so, or because you've heard everything, fear the Lord, serve him wholeheartedly. Put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? And hopefully you get the bit of sarcasm that Joshua's laying out there. Serve the Lord alone, but if you choose not to, maybe you'd like to serve the gods of the Amorites, which, by the way, whose 3-bedroom, 2-bath house you live in, maybe you want to serve their gods. And then he makes this declaration that I'm sure many of you have on a coffee cup or maybe plastered somewhere inside your house. He says, but as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. As for me and for my family, we will serve the Lord. Now, let me just tell you what I do in my own personal Bible study. When I study scripture and I'm studying characters, in order to make it more real to me, to where it's not just, text, and in order for me to get engrossed in the story, here's what I do, and you can do it if you want to. I take the characters that I'm reading, and I oftentimes put familiar voices to them. And that's just so for Joshua, he's 110. He's a war-torn leader, seasoned, and he's there. And so in my mind, the voice that I give Joshua, the voice that I give him John Wayne. I do. That's just where my mind goes. And so I imagine him standing up and saying, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, pilgrim. That's that moment that he is there. What he is saying is going, listen, here's the history. Here's how far God has brought you. And you got to choose. You have to choose today. You can choose to serve the gods of the Amorites, which, by the way, whose house you're living in, or serve the Lord. But when you serve the Lord, you serve him wholeheartedly. You serve him alone. Or in other words, what Joshua is saying is this. God doesn't need a co-author to write your story. God doesn't need a co-author to write your story. But how often do we let God write our story and we give him a great supporting co-author? It's God and or God with. God and we'll give him some money in case God needs some help. God and some time, God and some influence. Or the best thing that we can give God for help, us. It's God and me. And God, you write it, but I'm going to be a great co-author. Maybe God, you write the forward of my life story, but I got the rest from here. Or what he is saying is this, is neutrality is no good when it comes to serving the Lord. You cannot be neutral when it comes to something. You can't have a foot in God's camp and a foot in somebody else's camp. I'll serve a little bit of God and a little bit of something else. He goes, no, you choose. It's God alone or something else, God wholeheartedly or something else. When it comes to serving the Lord, neutrality is no good. You're either all in or you're walking away, and the choice is yours. Now, just by a show of hands, Saturday night made me proud. This 9:30 service made me proud. So please, 11 o'clock, do not drop the ball on this question I'm about to ask. How many of you, by a show of hands, 16 years and older, how many of you have learned the incredible life skill of driving a car with a manual transmission? Just by a show of hands. Oh, praise the Lord. It is a holy church. Okay, good. I learned, my first car was an Isuzu pickup, and I learned how to drive it. It was no power steering, so parallel parking was a nightmare. But I learned on a manual. Now, this has nothing to do with the message, but just my own curiosity. How many of you know how to shift without using the clutch? Have you learned that? Yeah, okay, that's pro stuff, right? Sir, you raised your hand pretty fast. I'm impressed. All right. So when I learned to drive a manual, I learned on my grandfather's farm. And I was like 14 driving on his farm, and so I learned. And then what I remember the worst part about driving a car with a manual transmission, and if you drove, you probably know this. He'd take me into the city, we're driving around, no problem. But the worst part is when you found yourself at a stoplight on a hill. No. And then you're there at a stoplight, and then the idiot behind you pulls up right up on your bumper. No clue, you have no idea what you're doing. And then the light turns green. And there's that moment where you've got to give it gas, release the clutch. And if you don't release the clutch, you begin to roll backwards. And if you let off the clutch too fast, you stall, and then you got to start it again. And it's so embarrassing. And there's that moment where you've got to go boom and time it, and you've got to go all in. Because if you're neutral, you're rolling backwards. And what Joshua is saying is there is no neutral when it comes to serving the Lord. You're either serving him wholeheartedly or not at all. And he goes, the choice is yours. And so maybe in 2015, God was the author of your story, but maybe the question you need to ask is, what co-author did you give him? Time, money, or influence, or really hard work, or I'll do it myself. I'll give God the forward and I'll write the rest myself. He goes, when it comes to serving the Lord, neutrality is no good. Now, I want you to go back, and I want you to look at the bottom of verse 15. Bottom of verse 15. He gives a bit of sarcasm, or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? And then he just makes this declaration, and many of you may have this, or you've seen it in your grandparents' house. He goes, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Now, I want you to get this picture. He's gathered everyone. He goes, listen, you serve who you want to serve. You make the decision, you make the choice that you want to make, you have whatever opinion that you want to have. But hear me very, very carefully. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. There was no apologies. There was no, gosh, we kind of want to make sure everyone's happy. Just going, you do what you want to do. It's your own choice. But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. He makes this unwavering declaration of who's the author of his story. And for many of us, God is the author of our story, but we've made him a ghostwriter. Meaning, He's writing it, but nobody knows it's him. And we have our Sunday friends that we keep on Sunday, and we have our Saturday night friends that we keep on Saturday night, and those two worlds do not collide. Those two things do not come together. And we don't want Saturday to meet Sunday. We certainly don't want Sunday to meet Saturday, and they don't know that each other exists. And so when it comes to God writing the story of your life, he does, but he's a great ghostwriter. Nobody knows that he's writing it. Joshua stands up and goes, you think what you want to think, you do what you want to do, but as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Now, I know many of you are going to go to work, or you're going to go to school, or you're going to go to family, where they have different opinions about who Jesus is and what he did. And you've had an experience. Jesus has changed your life. Hear me very, very carefully. The person with the experience is not at the mercy of the person with the opinion. The person with the experience is not at the mercy of the person with the opinion, meaning they can think what they want to think, they can have all the opinions they want to have, but they cannot change the experience that you have had with Jesus. How he changed you, how he shaped you, how he redeemed you, how he healed you, how he delivered you, how he molded you. They cannot change your experience. And Romans 1:16 says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And maybe 2016 is just the year that you declare that God is the author of your story and not just a ghostwriter. And what if 2016 you begin to take a stand going, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. You think what you want to think. You form whatever opinion that you want to form, but you cannot change my experience. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Now, you're all smart people, and you're going to come in here. And again, I know many of you, this is like a New Year's resolution, and your first Sunday back here in January, and yes, I'll check it off the box. And you go, yeah, Chris, that's great, man. I get that. I'm all in. I need me some more God in my life in 2016. That's great. 2015 was an awful year, so yes, I want to make God first and foremost in my life. I get that. Yes, that's what I need to do. But Chris, how in the world am I supposed to do that? I mean, that's great. But again, Joshua's at the end of his life. Joshua's on his way out. He gives his charge. And yeah, Chris, 2016, I want God and I want to do that. But how in the world am I supposed to do that when I go home or when I'm at work or when I'm at school or when I'm with my family? See, this wasn't the first time that the children of Israel heard this. They knew they were supposed to serve the Lord and serve the Lord alone. And decades earlier, before Joshua was the leader, before they stepped into the promised land, decades earlier when Moses was leading them, he gave them a similar charge, but there was actually some action steps followed behind it. And that charge is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is Moses speaking. In verse 4, he says this, he says, listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord what? The Lord alone. Sole author. Look what he says. He goes, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. You must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. In other words, he's going, it starts on the inside. Your heart, your soul, your mind, the things on the inside, it starts by serving him on the inside. You've got to be 100% convinced. And for many of you, there are places in your mind and in your heart that, honestly, the person sitting next to you probably doesn't know. Your best friend, your spouse may not even, there are places in your mind, your heart, you go, you know what? I'm still holding on to these things. It's a secret addiction. It's anger, it's unforgiveness, it's the things you do or the places you go on your business trip when your husband or wife is not there. Those things in your mind and in your heart that has kept you from following the Lord 100%. He goes, it starts on the inside, and then it continues, verse 7. He says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you are getting up. Talk about them. Repeat them when you're going about. In other words, it starts on the inside and it flows to the outside. With your kids, with your coworkers, with your friends. The question is, do people know that you actually follow Jesus, that you're actually serving the Lord, or is he a really nice ghostwriter of your story? starts on the inside and it flows outwardly. You repeat them, you talk about them with your kids and the future generations, and then he wraps it up. Verse 8, he says, and tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates, meaning it is a longevity, it is a lifetime of following the Lord. In other words, serving the Lord starts on the inside, it flows to the outside, and it's for a lifetime. Serve the Lord on the inside with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. It flows to the outside and the people in your life, and you begin to share and you begin to talk and you have spiritual conversations, and you do it forever. On the inside, what are those things in your life and in your heart that you need to leave in 2015 in order to 100% follow the Lord in 2016? The inside. The outside. Who are those people that the Lord is placing in your life? And do they know that you follow the Lord? Do you initiate? Do you have spiritual conversations? And for many of you, it just needs to start in the home. It just needs to start with your spouse or with your kids or with your friends that are like family. It needs to start at home. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you, and I don't know what your stereotype is of preachers' families, but let me just tell you what it's like in my house with me and Brianna and the kids. And you just need to know this. I'm going to lay all the cards on the table, and you can judge however you want to judge. But here it is. You need to understand that me and Brianna, we do not have formal family Bible studies with our kids. We don't. I know many of you think, well, I'm sure like every night for 2 hours, Chris sits in a recliner and the kids gather around his feet and he begins to expound on Leviticus. I'm sure that's what happens. We got 4 kids like under the age of 8. We can't even eat dinner together that lasts longer than 7 minutes. I mean, it's crazy chaos. No, we don't have formal family Bible studies with our kids, but let me tell you what we do have. We have daily conversations with our kids about spiritual things. When they get up and get ready to school, on the way to the bus stop, when they get home, when they go to the basketball games, when we're going to eat at Chick-fil-A, when we're getting them ready for bed, we have spiritual conversations. And we work through things, we process through things. What do you think Jesus says? How would Jesus act? How would Jesus respond? Because what we don't want is we don't want our kids thinking that serving the Lord is something special you do for 2 hours every night and that's it. We want them to know that it is a daily part of their life and of their conversation. And we help them process and what does Jesus think and how does this apply to your life? And so no, we don't have family formal Bible studies, but we have daily conversations about spiritual things. And I will tell you, just as a parent, and Brianna can attest to this as well, there are fewer things in life that are more fulfilling than to have a spiritual conversation with your kid. And to see them process it and to see them understand it. A few months ago, we were putting them to bed. And when we put them to bed, sometimes I open up the kids' Bible and I read it to them. Sometimes they just call out random Bible verses and I read those. Sometimes we just pray and we talk about things. It kind of varies. Again, it's not this ritualistic thing. It's just a daily conversation. But we were talking and just talking about Jesus and, asked Carrie, about Jesus. And she goes, Dad, I go, what? She goes, Jesus made me so beautiful. We haven't discussed humility. That's a conversation for another time. But, yes, Jesus made you beautiful. Talking to David about Jesus and his conclusion anytime we read a Bible story. What do you think? Dad, yeah, Jesus says don't push people. Well, yeah, that's a good thing not to, just don't push people, okay? And then Daniel, my oldest, my 8-year-old, talking to him, he goes, Dad, I got a question for you. It's like right before bed, it's good. I was like, yeah, what is it? Good. Dad, can you explain to me the Trinity? Ask your mother. She'll be up here in just a minute. I was like, the Trinity. He goes, yeah, what? Explain the Trinity to me. I'm like, oh, God. It's tough enough to explain to adults, let alone like elementary kids. Like, well, okay. You're sitting there. He's just kind of, I'll go, well, there's God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. They're co-equal, but they're one God, triune God. Make sense? And I can see him processing it. I'm like, oh, I butchered this. And I was like, you got questions? He goes, he processed. He goes, it's kind of like, I've got a head and a chest and legs, but it's all one body. I'm like, you got it, yeah. Yeah, that's it. And he goes, I go, you understand the Trinity? Yeah, makes sense, Dad. Good night. But to have these spiritual conversations that starts on the inside with you and your heart and your mind, and it flows to the outside. And for many of you, it just needs to start at the home. Or maybe it starts in the cubicle, or maybe it starts in the boardroom, or maybe it starts in the classroom or on the team or in the locker room. But do people know that you serve the Lord? And it's got to be for a lifetime. You see, for many of you, I know January of 2015, you probably sat in the same seat and made the same declarations and go, man, 2015 is going to be different. Then something happened, you got a phone call, you had a conversation, they divorced you, you got cancer, you got fired, and all of a sudden these grandiose New Year's resolutions become a distant memory and your life becomes the same way over and over again. Following the Lord, serving the Lord is a lifetime journey. Through the ups and through the downs and through the highs and the lows. Joshua, his life wasn't perfect. I mean, he had all sorts of battles and struggles, but he followed the Lord. So hear me carefully. Following the Lord doesn't mean the pain goes away. It just means you find purpose in the pain that you experience. Let me repeat that. Following the Lord doesn't mean the pain goes away, but it means you find purpose in the pain that you experience. And so those moments that were not in your top 9, the hurting, the frustrating, the devastating, the lonely, there is purpose in those when God is the author of your life. And it's a lifelong journey of faith. Because hear me carefully, nobody gets remembered because they had a month of great faith. Nobody admires Billy Graham or Mother Teresa because, well, back in 1975 of June, it was a great month of faith for those two. They're admired because they have a lifelong journey of faith through the ups and through the downs and through the highs and through the lows. And so serving the Lord begins on the inside. Got to cleanse my heart and my mind and everything that's on inside of me. And God, let me step forward and let me begin to share with others and let me begin to live my life so that people know you're the author, not a ghostwriter. God, let me do it for a lifetime. Now, again, I understand that hearing these messages, you go, yeah, that's great, and you're going to go home, and it becomes quickly a distant memory. But we wanted to do something, to give you something tangible to do. And so after the service, what we want you to do is that if you go, you know what, I want 2016 to be different. I really want to commit to serve the Lord on the inside and on the outside and for a lifetime. If you tell me, yeah, Chris, that is me. 2015, it's in the past. 2016 is a new year. I want me and my friends or my family, we want to serve the Lord. So what I'm going to ask after the service is over is if you'll go out into our courtyard where the waterfall is, and you're going to see a whole wall of brick. And there's going to be buckets of chalk out there. And what you don't know is that your kids have been out there with sidewalk chalk and as an illustration for the lesson that they're learning. But what I want you to go out there is go get your kids from childcare or your friend that you're here with. If you go, you know what, I'm committing that 2016 is different. Then just take a piece of chalk and just write the letter and the numbers. Write this. Just write D649 and then sign your name. First name or last name, whichever one. D649, which stands for Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. It says, as they wrote them as reminders. And you go out there and just say, write D649, my family name or my name, and just commit that it's going to be a lifelong journey. On the inside, it's got to start in here, in your heart and in your mind. It flows outside, and I'm going to write it down for all to see, and I'm going to make a declaration. I'm going to serve the Lord. And the reason why we have a piece of chalk is because we know that probably this afternoon or sometime this week, it's going to rain, and it's going to wash away. The point is that it's a daily reminder. It's not just a one-time New Year's resolution, write it and forget about it. It's daily saying, God, let me serve you inside, outside, and for a lifetime. Lord, let me serve you inside, outside, for a lifetime. Because what I want all of us at the end of our lives to say there was a lot of ups and there was a lot of downs, but at the end we can say that as for me and my family, we served the Lord. He was the sole author of our life story. Up until I was 19 years old, God was a great co-author of my life story. Became a Christian at a young age 6. Grew up in a Christian home. My dad's a preacher. I'm a preacher's kid. And I wasn't the proverbial preacher's kid that was wild and crazy, but I went through Sunday school and Awanas and church camps and high school. God was the author of my life story, but he had a great co-author that I had given him. What I had given God as the co-author was Chris. Chris loved him some Chris. Chris could do no wrong in Chris's eyes. Chris had it all figured out. Chris was invincible. It was God wrote the foreword. Chris, he's got the rest. Pride was my thing, and whatever Chris wanted to do, Chris did. Chris knew best. Yes, God, he's a co-author, but Chris really was doing most of the writing. So went through high school, that pride got more and more. When I went to college, man, it hit a whole new level. It's typical freshman, typical sophomore. Yes, I went to church, and God was the author, but he was a very distant co-author, and really Chris was doing most of the writing, making most of the decisions. I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore. It was spring break. I went snow skiing with a group of friends. It was day 2 on the slopes. We were out there snow skiing around. Came to a snowboard park with ramps and everything, and I got dared, hey, why don't you go hit that snowboard ramp? Chris knew that Chris was invincible, so Chris decided, let's do this. I go to the top of the hill. Boy, I tuck those poles, and I hit that ramp as hard and as fast as I possibly could. And man, it was feeling great until all of a sudden I looked down and the ramp was way back there. I had overshot the ramp, and when I came down and I landed, I hit and I heard a pop in my lower back, and it felt like it caught on fire. Wiped out, was there. The world was kind of spinning, didn't know what had happened. They came, and the ski patrol put me in one of those mummy bags, those embarrassing things. Skied me all the way down to the bottom of the slope, loaded me up in an ambulance, was there. I got x-rays, and I'll still remember to this day, sitting in the hospital room. Still had my ski boots on, still had my goggles on my head. My dad's there in the emergency room. The doctor walks in with the x-ray. And he looks at me, he looks at my dad, he goes, Chris, you shattered your lower vertebrae. And he said, it's a 50-50 chance on these things. 50% of the time when you shatter it, it goes into the spinal cord and you're instantly paralyzed. 50% of the time it shatters away and you can walk again. He goes, fortunately for you, it's shattered away. He goes, but you'll be wearing a brace for the next 6 months. And for the next 6 months, I wore this plastic brace, went from about here to about here, fully enclosed plastic, and it was spring and rolled into the summer through Texas, and it was hot, and it was sweaty, and it was stinky, and as a college kid, I couldn't lift anything heavier than a textbook. And for 3 of those 6 months, I spent the majority of my time lying flat on my back in the bed in the little rental house there in College Station, Texas. But it was there in those 3 months, in the quietness when all my friends were out doing what college friends do, and I was laying there flat on my back, I could hear the Lord whispering, do I have your attention now? And it was there in those moments where I go, God, my life is yours. As a 19-year-old kid with a shattered lower vertebrae laying flat on my back in College Station, Texas, that's when God became the sole author of my life story. And honestly, my hope and prayer for you is that it doesn't take an emergency room visit. It doesn't take a DWI. It doesn't take an arrest. It doesn't take a divorce or a bankruptcy. All it takes is a piece of chalk writing on the outside of a church wall saying, today the Lord becomes the sole author of my life story. He's no longer the co-author. He's no longer just a ghostwriter. I will stand and make 2016 the year that I declare that it's for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. In 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now, my hope is that you look back at this Sunday in January and you go, I don't remember his name, but it was some preacher on a stage and he had a piece of chalk and I graffitied on the outside of the church. But that was the day that the Lord became the sole author of my life story. And that you can come to the end of your life through the highs and through the lows and through the crazy journey that your life is and say, you know what? As for me and my family, we served the Lord. Let me pray for us. With every head bowed and every eye closed, I know for many of you, 2015 was an awful, awful year. My prayer for all of us is, Lord, is that as we walk into 2016, that we would just stop right now where we're at, and God, we would examine our heart and our mind in those dark places that nobody knows about. God, that you'd point out anything in us that offends you. And that you'd create in us a clean heart and a clean mind, and that we would begin to serve you on the inside wholeheartedly 100%. And God, that starting today in this afternoon, that you begin to bring people in our life, God, that we need to begin to serve you on the outside, and they know that the Lord is the author of our life story, and that you're not a ghostwriter. And God, that we would do it for the rest of our lives. That it wouldn't just be another Sunday sermon in January that we make a New Year's resolution, but God, something would click, something would change. And that it wouldn't be a day of faith, a week of faith, a month of faith, God, that we would begin to live lives of faith that follow you. Father, I pray for everyone in this room, kids, students, adults. My prayer today is that you become the sole author of our stories. We love you, Jesus, and we ask all these things in your precious and holy name.